Billionaire invited his barren ex-wife to baby shower to mock her. She shocked him with quadruplets. You really thought I wouldn't come? The words sliced through the afternoon air like a blade, silencing every conversation on the manicured lawn of the Rosewood estate. I watched my ex-husband's face drain of all color while his pregnant wife's manicured fingers dug into his arm. Valentina, what are you doing here? His voice cracked. You invited me, remember? You said it would be good for me to see how happy you are now, but Maximilian, his mother interrupted, her eyes wide with confusion. Whose children are these? These are my children, Mrs. Ashworth. Lucien, Celeste, Antoine, and Margot Moreau. Maximilian's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, they have their father's name. My husband's name. That's when 4 perfect toddlers spilled out of my pearl-white Bentley like living proof that everything he told everyone about me was a lie. The same man who had convinced the world I was broken, barren, and worthless now stood frozen as his carefully constructed narrative crumbled before his eyes. That if you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been written off, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, hit that like button right now, because what happens next will restore your faith in justice. But to understand how sweet this revenge really is, you need to know how this billionaire systematically destroyed me, and how I rose from those ashes to become his worst nightmare. My name is Valentina Moreau now, though for 7 torturous years I was Valentina Ashworth, desperately trying to be the perfect wife to a man who saw me as nothing more than a defective incubator for his dynasty. This is the story of how I transformed from a woman begging doctors to repair what was never broken, to watching my ex-husband's carefully constructed world crumble as my 4 children ran toward the playground at his precious celebration. Let me take you back to the beginning. When I was 25 and naive enough to believe that love could conquer the cruelest of hearts, that I met Maximilian Ashworth at a charity gala in Manhattan, 2018. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and the kind of wealth that could solve world hunger, but chose instead to buy diamond-encrusted watches. I was there representing the non-profit where I worked. He was there writing checks that meant nothing to his bottomless fortune but everything to our cause. The moment he walked into that ballroom, conversations shifted toward him like flowers turning toward the sun. 6 feet of tailored perfection in a Tom Ford tuxedo that probably cost more than my annual salary. His steel-gray eyes swept the room with the confidence of a man who had never been told no, never been denied anything his heart desired. When he approached me during the silent auction, his presence commanded not just my attention, but the attention of everyone within a 20-foot radius. Women straightened their postures. Men adjusted their ties. The very air seemed to vibrate with the electricity of his power. You're passionate about your work, he said, his voice carrying that distinctive blend of authority and charm that made billionaires irresistible. I've been watching you talk about the literacy program. I admire that in a woman. Thank you, I replied, trying to maintain my composure despite the way his gaze seemed to see straight through to my soul. Education changes lives. These children deserve every opportunity we can give them. Spoken like someone who understands the value of investment, he said, stepping closer. I'm Maximilian Ashworth. He said his name like it should mean something to me, and honestly, it should have. Ashworth Industries was an empire built on real estate, technology, and the kind of ruthless business practices that created billionaires and destroyed competitors. Valentina Torres, I said, extending my hand. When he took it, his fingers lingered longer than necessary, his thumb tracing across my knuckles in a gesture that sent electricity up my arm. Beautiful name for a beautiful woman, he said. Tell me, Valentina Torres, what would it take to convince you to have dinner with me tomorrow night? What I didn't know then was that Maximilian collected beautiful, passionate things the way other men collected vintage wines. To possess them, control them, and ultimately consume them until nothing remained but empty bottles and broken dreams. Our courtship was a masterclass in seduction painted in gold leaf and diamond dust. Private jets to Paris for weekend getaways where we'd stroll along the Seine while he whispered promises in my ear. You're different from other women, Valentina, he would say as we walked through the Louvre. You have substance. You have purpose. You're going to be the mother of my children someday. The way he said it should have been romantic, but there was something possessive in his tone, something that made me feel like he was already planning my future without asking what I wanted. He sent flowers to my office every Monday. Not just any flowers, but rare orchids flown in from Thailand, arrangements so stunning that my co-workers would gather around my desk just to breathe in their exotic fragrance. Ashworth must really love you, my colleague Sarah would say, touching the delicate petals. These must cost more than my rent. He's very generous, I would reply, though something about the extravagance always made me slightly uncomfortable. It felt less like love and more like marking territory. The proposal came 6 months later, during a weekend at his estate in the Hamptons. The house was a monument to wealth, with marble floors that echoed our footsteps and windows that overlooked manicured gardens designed by the same landscape architect who worked on European palaces. He led me to the rose garden at sunset, where hundreds of white roses had been arranged in the shape of a heart. A string quartet played Pachelbel's canon while rose petals fell from hidden speakers in the trees above us. "Valentina," he said, dropping to one knee on the marble pathway, "you've brought meaning to my life in ways I never thought possible." The ring was a 10-carat diamond surrounded by smaller stones, so large and brilliant that it caught the dying sunlight and threw rainbows across the garden. "Will you marry me? Will you be the mother of my children? Will you help me build a legacy that will last forever?" "Yes," I whispered, tears streaming down my face as he slipped the ring onto my finger. Yes to everything, but even in that perfect moment, I should have noticed how he phrased the question. Not will you marry me and build our life together, but will you help me build my legacy? Even then, I was just a supporting character in his story. We married 8 months later in a ceremony that made royal weddings look modest. 300 guests filled the cathedral in the Hamptons, including senators, celebrities, and business moguls whose combined net worth could have funded small countries. That white dress was a custom Vera Wang creation, hand-beaded with thousands of crystals that caught the light with every movement. The train was so long it required 3 assistants to manage, flowing behind me like liquid silk as I walked down that endless aisle. "You look perfect," Maximilian whispered as I reached the altar. Absolutely perfect. During our vows, he looked directly into my eyes and said words that should have been beautiful but felt strangely clinical. "I promise to cherish you," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the cathedral sound system. "I promise to protect you. I promise to give you everything you need to fulfill your purpose in my life, your purpose in my life. Not our life together. Not our shared dreams. My life, and your purpose within it." But I was too caught up in the fairy tale to hear the possessiveness in his words, too blinded by the diamond on my finger and the promise of the beautiful life we were going to build together. When we danced to our first song, Maximilian held me close and whispered in my ear, "You're mine now, Valentina. Completely mine." I thought it was romantic. I thought it was love. I was so wrong. The first crack in paradise appeared 6 months after our honeymoon in Bora Bora. We were having breakfast in our penthouse, the morning sun streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked Central Park. "Are you tracking your cycle properly?" Maximilian asked, his tone clinical as he reviewed stock reports on his tablet. "We've been trying for 4 months now. 4 months. As if conception was a business merger that should have closed by the first quarter. "These things take time," I said gently, reaching for his hand across the marble breakfast table. "The doctor said it can take up to a year for healthy couples," his steel-gray eyes fixed on me with the same intensity he reserved for hostile takeovers. "Healthy couples, yes. But we need to ensure there are no deficiencies on either side." "Deficiencies?" The word lodged in my chest like a shard of ice. "Max," I said, trying to keep my voice light, "we've only been trying for 4 months. That's completely normal." "Normal isn't good enough, Valentina. The Ashworth name has been carried on for generations. I won't be the one to break that chain because we were too casual about something this important." He set down his tablet and looked at me with the kind of focus that had made him billions. "I'm making an appointment with Dr. Richardson. He's the best fertility specialist in the city. We're going to approach this systematically, scientifically." What followed was a systematic campaign to convince me that my body was failing us both. Maximilian hired the most expensive fertility specialists in the country, doctors who charged thousands of dollars for consultations and treated conception like a science experiment. Dr. Richardson's office was all white marble and chrome, sterile and cold like a laboratory. The waiting room was filled with other women who looked as desperate and defeated as I was beginning to feel. "Mrs. Ashworth," Dr. Richardson said during our first appointment, "your husband has explained your situation. 4 months of trying with no success. That's certainly within normal parameters, but given your husband's concerns, we should run some preliminary tests." "What kind of tests?" I asked. Blood work to check your hormone levels. Ultrasounds to examine your reproductive organs. Standard fertility evaluation procedures. Maximilian squeezed my hand, but it felt more like a warning than comfort. That we just want to make sure everything is functioning properly, he said. There's no point in wasting time if there's an underlying issue we need to address. Preliminary tests turned into comprehensive evaluations. Blood work that left my arms bruised from multiple needle sticks. Ultrasounds that required uncomfortable procedures. Tests with names I couldn't pronounce that left me sore and emotionally drained. Meanwhile, Maximilian scheduled our life around ovulation calendars with the precision of a military operation. He bought digital ovulation predictors, basal body thermometers, and fertility tracking apps that turned my phone into a constant reminder of my body's supposed failures. Your luteal phase is slightly short, he would say, reading from medical websites like he'd earned a degree in reproductive endocrinology. That could be affecting implantation. We should discuss progesterone supplements with Dr. Richardson. That he spoke about my body like it was a broken machine that needed fixing, like I was a problem to be solved rather than the woman he'd promised to love and cherish. The worst part wasn't the endless medical procedures or the hormone injections that made me feel like a stranger in my own skin. It was watching Maximilian with other people's children at social events, seeing him light up with a warmth he never showed me anymore. At his business partner's birthday party, I watched him play with a toddler, lifting the little boy high in the air while the child giggled with delight. Maximilian's face was transformed, genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in months. He's so good with children, the child's mother said to me. You two are going to make beautiful babies. That I hope so, I replied, forcing a smile while my heart broke a little more, because Maximilian was good with children. He was patient and playful and everything a father should be. But only with other people's children. With me, he was clinical and demanding and increasingly frustrated with my body's refusal to cooperate with his timeline. That he started posting photos on social media with captions that felt like daggers to my heart. Can't wait to be a father someday, he wrote under a photo of himself with his nephew. Some people are just born to be parents, he posted after spending an afternoon with friends who had young children. The comments were always supportive, always encouraging, always painting him as the devoted husband patiently waiting for his wife to give him the family he deserved. But I was the one sitting at home, alone with pregnancy forums and fertility apps, injecting myself with hormones that made me nauseated and emotionally unstable. His mother, Patricia Ashworth, began making pointed comments during our monthly family dinners at the estate. She was a woman who had built her identity around being the matriarch of a powerful dynasty. That I do hope will have grandchildren soon, she would say during dessert, her eyes boring into me. The Ashworth name must carry on, you know. It's been in our family for over a century. We're working on it, Mrs. Ashworth, I would reply, my cheeks burning with shame. Well, I certainly hope so. Maximilian deserves to be a father. He's always been so good with children, so patient. Some women just aren't cut out for motherhood, but I'm sure that's not the case with you, dear. Her words were like poison wrapped in silk, sweet on the surface but deadly underneath. By our third year of marriage, Maximilian had stopped pretending patience was a virtue. The man who had once whispered sweet nothings in my ear now spoke to me like I was an employee who wasn't meeting performance standards. That he would make jokes about my biological clock in front of his business associates, discussing our fertility struggles with strangers as if I weren't standing right there. Valentina and I have been trying for a while now, he would say at dinner parties, his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that looked supportive but felt possessive. It's been challenging, but we're exploring all our options. What kind of options? People would ask. Well, there are various medical interventions available these days. Sometimes nature needs a little help, especially when there are underlying issues. The way he said underlying issues made it clear who he thought was the problem. I became a problem to be solved, a broken machine that needed fixing, a disappointment that he had to manage rather than the woman he promised to love for better or worse. The breaking point came on a rain-soaked evening in November 2022. I was in our master bathroom, preparing for another round of fertility treatments. The counter was covered with syringes, medication vials, and alcohol swabs, turning our bathroom into a medical facility. That I was drawing up the hormone injection when Maximilian appeared in the doorway, his reflection in the mirror showing a man who had grown tired of his favorite toy. Valentina, he said, his voice carrying a finality that made my blood freeze. "We need to discuss alternative arrangements, I asked, still holding the syringe. "Like what? I've been thinking," he continued, loosening his tie with casual indifference. "Perhaps we've been forcing something that isn't meant to be. Perhaps we need to consider whether this marriage is serving either of our interests." The syringe fell from my trembling fingers, clattering against the marble floor like my breaking heart. "What are you saying?" I whispered that I'm saying that maybe we rushed into this whole family planning endeavor. Maybe we need to evaluate whether we're compatible for the long term before we bring a child into what has become complicated. 7 years of marriage, and suddenly we were complicated. "Max, we've been together for 8 years. We're married. How much more compatible do we need to be?" He began pacing our bedroom, his footsteps muffled by the Persian rug that cost more than most people's cars. "That's exactly the issue, Valentina. All we do anymore is focus on getting pregnant. When was the last time we simply enjoyed each other's company? When was the last time we had fun?" I wanted to remind him that he was the one who had turned our relationship into a fertility clinic. But something in his tone warned me this conversation was heading toward a cliff I wasn't prepared to fall from. "We can have fun again," I said, my voice desperate and pleading. "We can take a vacation, go back to date nights, do whatever you want. But talking about ending our marriage? Max, that sounds like you want a divorce." "Maybe I do." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs and making my knees buckle. "Did I ask this about the pregnancy?" I asked, my voice barely audible. "Because the doctors said there's still hope. We could try IVF, or surrogacy, or adoption, or whatever you want. Please, Max, don't give up on us." "Stop." He finally looked at me, and what I saw in his eyes was worse than anger. It was pity. "This isn't just about getting pregnant anymore. This is about who we've become. I feel like I'm married to someone whose entire identity revolves around trying to have a baby, because you made it my only identity." The words exploded from me before I could stop them. "You're the one who bought the ovulation kits. You're the one who scheduled everything. You're the one who made me feel like a failure every month when I got my period." "That I never said you were a failure, you didn't have to say it. I could see it in your face every time the pregnancy test was negative. I could hear it in your voice when you talked to your friends about how difficult this was for you. Like I was some kind of defective appliance you were stuck with." Maximilian's jaw tightened, his mask of civility slipping. "That's not fair, and you know it. I've been nothing but supportive through this entire process." "Supportive?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Max, you stopped touching me unless it was ovulation week. You stopped asking about my day unless it involved doctor appointments. You turned me into a project you were trying to fix instead of a wife you were supposed to love, maybe because that's all you became." The words hung between us like poison gas, toxic and deadly and impossible to take back. He realized immediately that he'd said the quiet part out loud, that he'd revealed the truth he'd been hiding behind concern and medical necessity. "So that's what you really think," I said quietly. "That I became broken, and you got tired of dealing with it?" We stared at each other across our bedroom, and I felt the foundation of everything I'd believed about our marriage cracking beneath my feet. This wasn't about taking a break from trying to conceive. This was about Maximilian being done with me. Comment below if you've ever felt like you were the problem in a relationship when you weren't. Because what happened next will show you exactly how cruel people can be when they want to rewrite history to make themselves the victim. 3 days later, divorce papers arrived at our penthouse, delivered by a courier who couldn't meet my eyes. The envelope was thick and official, bearing the letterhead of Manhattan's most ruthless divorce attorneys. 37 pages of legal language that essentially said Maximilian wanted everything and I deserved nothing, according to his team of lawyers. Our prenuptial agreement, which I'd signed along with what I thought were insurance documents the week before our wedding, left me with virtually nothing. The penthouse was his. The cars were his. The jewelry he'd given me during our courtship was considered conditional gifts that had to be returned. I sat in our living room, surrounded by the remnants of our life together, reading legal documents that reduced 7 years of marriage to a series of asset divisions and custody arrangements for possessions I'd never really owned. The cruelest part wasn't the financial devastation. It was the narrative Maximilian's lawyers had constructed, painting me as an unstable woman who had become obsessed with pregnancy to the detriment of the marriage. According to their filing, I had refused to seek appropriate mental health treatment for my fertility obsession. I had created a hostile home environment by turning every conversation into a discussion about pregnancy. I had damaged the marriage by prioritizing conception over the relationship itself. Every accusation was a masterclass in gaslighting, taking the very things Maximilian had demanded and turning them into evidence of my instability. But the cruelest revelation was yet to come. 2 weeks after receiving the divorce papers, while I was packing my belongings into boxes and trying to figure out how to rebuild my life from nothing, I received a call that would change everything. Mrs. Ashworth? This is Dr. Harrison from the Manhattan Fertility Center. I'm sorry, I said, confused. I think you have the wrong number. I've never been to your clinic. According to our records, you had comprehensive fertility testing done 3 weeks ago. The results are quite remarkable, and I wanted to follow up personally. The room began to spin. Doctor, I think there's been a mistake. I didn't have any tests done at your clinic. Let me check our records, he said, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Yes, the tests were ordered by your husband, Maximilian Ashworth. He said you were too emotional about the results to call yourself, so he wanted to handle the follow-up personally. My hand started shaking. What kind of tests? Comprehensive fertility evaluation. Hormone levels, ovarian reserve, fallopian tube assessment, the complete panel. Mrs. Ashworth, I have to say, your results are exceptional. You have the fertility markers of a woman 10 years younger. I'm actually surprised you haven't conceived naturally. Given these numbers, the phone slipped from my trembling fingers as the full scope of Maximilian's betrayal crashed over me like a tsunami. He had secretly ordered fertility tests for me and hidden the results. But why would he hide test results that proved I wasn't broken? When I called Dr. Harrison back, demanding more information, the truth unraveled like a carefully constructed lie finally exposed to light. Based on your fertility markers, Dr. Harrison explained, you should have had a 90% chance of conception within the first year of trying, assuming normal male fertility and proper timing. What would prevent conception in someone with my fertility levels? Poor timing, male factor infertility, or, he paused, clearly uncomfortable, deliberate interference with the conception process, deliberate interference. The words echoed in my mind as I thought back to all those months of tracking my cycle, how Maximilian had been the one managing the timing, buying the ovulation kits, interpreting the results, scheduling our intimacy around what he claimed were my fertile days. Dr. Harrison, I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest, is it possible for someone to deliberately time intercourse to avoid conception while making it appear they're trying to conceive? Theoretically, yes. If someone had access to accurate ovulation data, they could avoid the fertile window while maintaining the appearance of trying. But that would require deliberate deception over an extended period. Maximilian had been deliberately sabotaging our attempts to conceive while convincing me that I was the problem. For 3 years, I had injected myself with hormones that made me sick. I had undergone painful procedures that left me emotionally and physically drained. I had blamed my body for failing to do something Maximilian was actively preventing from happening, and when he'd grown tired of the charade, he'd secretly confirmed that I was perfectly fertile, then used our fertility struggles as justification for leaving me. The discovery of Maximilian's betrayal should have destroyed me. Instead, it ignited something I didn't know existed within me. A fierce determination to not just survive, but to thrive in ways that would make his cruelty irrelevant. I moved to Paris with the modest settlement from our divorce, using every penny to enroll in business school at INSEAD. While Maximilian was playing house with his new girlfriend, a socialite named Bianca who came with ready-made children from her previous marriage, I was learning about international finance, luxury brand management, and building empires from nothing. I started therapy with Dr. Marie Dubois, a brilliant psychologist who specialized in helping survivors of narcissistic abuse. Valentina, she said during one of our early sessions, what Maximilian did to you has a name. It's called reproductive coercion, and it's a form of intimate partner violence. Reproductive coercion? I had never heard the term. It's when someone uses pregnancy, contraception, or fertility as a means of power and control. In your case, Maximilian used the promise of pregnancy to manipulate you, then used your supposed infertility to justify his abuse. but he wanted children, I protested. That's why he left me. Doctor. Du Bois shook her head gently. Valentina, Maximilian didn't want children with you. He wanted control over you. The moment you discovered your own worth, he would lose that control. So he kept you believing you were broken. Through therapy, I learned that everything Maximilian had told me about myself was a lie. I wasn't obsessive. I was dedicated. I wasn't unstable. I was passionate. I wasn't broken. I was betrayed. I wasn't worthless. I was undervalued. 6 months into my new life, I met Gabriel Moreau at a wine tasting in Bordeaux. I had driven down from Paris for the weekend, finally feeling strong enough to enjoy simple pleasures again. Gabriel was everything Maximilian wasn't. Kind where Max was cruel, genuine where Max was calculating, secure where Max was controlling. He was a successful vintner who had built his family's vineyard into an international luxury brand, but more importantly, he saw me as a complete person rather than a vessel for his ambitions. You have sad eyes, he said when we were introduced, his French accent wrapping around the words like silk. But also strong eyes. Like someone who has survived something difficult. That I'm working on the surviving part, I replied honestly. That we talked for hours that night, about wine and business and life and dreams. When I told Gabriel about my marriage to Maximilian, he listened without judgment, without trying to fix me or offer solutions. Valentina, Gabriel said that night as we walked through his family's vineyards under a canopy of stars, Maximilian didn't leave you because you couldn't have children. He left you because he was terrified of who you might become if you stopped believing his lies about yourself. Gabriel was right. Maximilian had kept me small and insecure because that's how he could control me. The moment I discovered my own worth, he would lose all power over me. Within a year, Gabriel and I had launched a luxury lifestyle consultancy that helped high-net-worth individuals curate authentic experiences. The company was immediately successful because we were solving a real problem, helping wealthy people find meaning beyond material possessions. Gabriel and I fell in love while building something meaningful together. When he proposed on the terrace of his family's chateau, overlooking vineyards that had been in his family for generations, it wasn't because he needed me to complete his life. Valentina, he said, getting down on one knee as the sun set over the rolling hills of Bordeaux, I don't need you to make me whole. I'm already whole. But I want to share my wholeness with someone I genuinely admire and respect. Will you marry me? Yes, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. Yes to everything. But the real miracle happened when we decided to start a family. Are you sure you're ready? Gabriel asked gently. After everything you went through with Maximilian, I'm ready, I said. But Gabriel, what if there really is something wrong with me? What if Maximilian was right and I can't have children? Gabriel took my hands in his eyes serious and loving. Valentina, if we can't have biological children, we'll adopt. If we can only have one child, we'll love that child with everything we have. If we have 10 children, we'll love them all. But I'm not marrying you to be a mother to my children. I'm marrying you because I love you, exactly as you are. I got pregnant on our first month of trying, exactly as Dr. Harrison had predicted I would with my exceptional fertility. When the ultrasound showed we were having twins, Gabriel wept with joy. 2 babies, he said, kissing me. We're so blessed. When the next ultrasound revealed we were actually having quadruplets, Gabriel spun me around the doctor's office, laughing about how we were going to need to expand the chateau. 4 babies, Gabriel said, his face glowing with happiness. Our little vineyard crew, are you sure you can handle 4 babies at once? I asked, still amazed by his reaction. Valentina, I can handle anything with you. You're the strongest woman I know. Gabriel had watched me build a successful company from nothing. He'd witnessed me heal from years of psychological abuse. He'd seen me discover my own worth and refuse to settle for less than I deserved. When our quadruplets were born, 2 boys and 2 girls, all healthy and perfect, Gabriel insisted they carry his family name. That I want the world to know these children belong to our family, he said, holding little Celeste while I nursed Antoine. I want everyone to know how proud I am to be their father and your husband. So Lucien, Celeste, Antoine, and Margot Moreau came into the world as part of a family built on mutual respect, genuine love, and shared dreams that I was adjusting to life as a mother of 4 when Maximilian's baby shower invitation arrived. The envelope was addressed to Valentina Ashworth at my old address, but had been forwarded to our chateau in Bordeaux. That I stared at the invitation, realizing Maximilian had no idea that Valentina Ashworth no longer existed. The woman who had been broken by his betrayal had been replaced by Valentina Moreau, entrepreneur, mother, and wife to one of France's most respected vintners. Bianca's having another baby shower, Gabriel said, reading over my shoulder. And Maximilian still thinks you're the pathetic ex-wife who never got over him. Are you going to go? He asked gently. That I looked at Gabriel holding Celeste while Antoine crawled around his feet, and I thought about the woman I'd been when Maximilian left me. That woman had believed she was worthless without a husband, broken without children, destined to live as a cautionary tale about women who couldn't keep their men satisfied. But the woman I'd become had built a multi-million-euro business, married a man who cherished her, and given birth to 4 beautiful children who would grow up knowing their mother was powerful. Actually, I said, smiling at Gabriel, I think I am going to go. Share this video if you believe everyone deserves to know their worth, because what I did next will restore your faith in karma and show you that sometimes the best revenge is simply becoming everything your abuser said you could never be. And that's how I found myself pulling into the parking lot of the same country club where Maximilian and I had celebrated our anniversary years ago, driving my pearl-white Bentley with 4 perfect children in the back seat, ready to show my ex-husband exactly who I'd become after he threw me away. The baby shower was being held at the same country club where Maximilian and I had celebrated our 3rd wedding anniversary, back when I still believed our marriage was worth celebrating. As I pulled into the circular driveway, memories flooded back of the woman I used to be. The woman who would have been intimidated by this place, who would have worried about fitting in with Maximilian's crowd, but that woman was gone. In her place sat Valentina Moreau, successful entrepreneur, devoted mother, and wife to a man who actually valued her. I checked my appearance in the rearview mirror. Designer dress that hugged my post-pregnancy curves perfectly, professional makeup that highlighted my confidence, and most importantly, the glow of a woman who had discovered her own worth. But the real surprise was in the back seat. Lucien, Celeste, Antoine, and Margot Moreau, 18 months old and absolutely perfect, were dressed in matching outfits that Gabriel had specially ordered from a children's boutique in Paris. They looked like little angels, completely unaware that they were about to become the instruments of their mother's revenge. Mama, Lucien babbled, reaching for me as I unbuckled his car seat. Yes, baby, I said, kissing his forehead. Mama's here. As I lifted each child from their seats, I thought about Maximilian's plan to humiliate me. He'd wanted everyone to see the broken, childless woman who'd been too damaged to keep him satisfied. He'd probably spent weeks telling people about his pathetic ex-wife who would show up desperate and alone, a cautionary tale about women who couldn't move on, but Maximilian had made one crucial error in his calculations. He'd assumed I would stay broken. Instead, I'd used his betrayal as fuel to become everything he told me I could never be. The country club's main entrance was decorated with pink and blue balloons, announcing to the world that Bianca was having another baby. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the party in full swing. Maximilian was holding court with his usual crowd of sycophants and social climbers, while Bianca showed off her pregnant belly to a group of admiring women. I took a deep breath, adjusted Celeste on my hip, and made sure the other 3 children were close beside me. This was it. The moment I'd been unconsciously preparing for since the day I discovered Maximilian's lies. The moment I walked through those doors, every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Every person who believed Maximilian's story about his broken, infertile ex-wife stared in shock at the confident woman with 4 beautiful children who just walked into their narrative. Maximilian's champagne glass slipped from his hand and shattered on the marble floor, the sound echoing through the suddenly silent room like a gunshot. Oh my God, someone whispered. Is that Valentina? Bianca, who'd been showing off her pregnant belly to a group of women, turned around and her face went pale. The woman Maximilian had described as pathetic and childless was standing in her designer dress with quadruplets who were clearly thriving and happy. Valentina, Maximilian said, his voice barely audible above the shocked murmurs of the crowd. What are you doing here? You invited me, remember? I said, my voice calm and confident as I shifted Antoine to my other arm. You said it would be good for me to see how happy you are now. the irony wasn't lost on me. Maximilian had wanted me to witness his happiness, but instead, everyone was witnessing mine. Maximilian's mother approached us first, her eyes wide with confusion and something that looked like panic. "Valentina, dear," she said, her voice strained, "whose children are these?" "These are my children, Mrs. Ashworth. Lucien, Celeste, Antoine, and Margot Moreau." Maximilian's voice cracked like a teenager's. "Yes, they have their father's name." "My husband's name." The word husband hit Maximilian like a physical blow. He'd been so certain I'd never recover from our divorce, never find someone else, never have the family I'd wanted so desperately. "You're married?" Bianca asked, her voice high and strained, her hand instinctively moving to her pregnant belly as if protecting her unborn child from some invisible threat. "Very happily married. Gabriel and I celebrated our second anniversary last month." I watched as the crowd began to process what they were seeing. The broken, barren woman from Maximilian's stories was standing before them with 4 healthy children and talking about a happy marriage to another man. "But Maximilian said you couldn't have children," Mrs. Ashworth said, looking confused and slightly betrayed. "He said that's why your marriage ended." I smiled gently at Maximilian's mother, the woman who'd pitted me for years based on her son's lies. "Mrs. Ashworth, I think Maximilian might have misunderstood some medical information. As you can see, I had no trouble having children once I was with the right partner." The implications of my words began to sink in. If I could have children easily with someone else, then what did that say about the fertility problems in my marriage to Maximilian? "How old are they?" Maximilian's brother David asked, his business mind already doing calculations. "18 months, I replied cheerfully, his eyes widened as he calculated backwards. "But that means you got pregnant almost immediately after your divorce was final." "Actually, I got pregnant about 6 months after our divorce." Apparently, Maximilian was incorrect about my fertility issues. A murmur went through the crowd as people began to realize the implications of what I was saying. If I'd gotten pregnant easily with someone else, then Maximilian's story about our marriage ending due to my infertility didn't make sense. "I don't understand," Bianca said, looking between Maximilian and me with growing alarm. "Maximilian said you had unexplained infertility, that you'd been trying for years with no success." "That we were trying for years with no success," I confirmed, bouncing Margot gently as she started to fuss. "But it turns out the problem wasn't my fertility after all." Maximilian's face had gone completely white. He knew where this was heading, and he was powerless to stop it. His carefully constructed narrative was unraveling in front of everyone who mattered to him. "Maximilian," his mother said slowly, her voice carrying the authority of a woman who'd built her identity around family legacy, "if Valentina could have children, why couldn't you two have children together?" The country club was dead silent except for my babies babbling happily in their strollers. Everyone was looking at Maximilian, waiting for an explanation that would make sense of the contradictions in his story. "It's complicated," Maximilian said weakly, his usual confidence completely gone. "Actually, it's not complicated at all," I said, pulling out my phone with my free hand. "Dr. Harrison from the fertility clinic helped me understand exactly what happened." Maximilian's eyes went wide with panic. "Valentina, don't what, Maximilian? Don't tell the truth. Don't share the medical records you hid from me. Don't explain to your family and friends how our marriage really ended." I looked around the room at all the people who believed Maximilian's version of our story, who'd pitted me as the broken woman who'd driven away a good man. Maximilian secretly ordered fertility tests for me 3 weeks before he filed for divorce. The results showed that I have exceptional fertility, better than average for my age. The doctor said I should have had no trouble conceiving naturally. The silence in the room was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop, but Maximilian never told me about those test results, I continued, my voice steady and clear. Instead, he used our fertility struggles as justification for ending our marriage. "What are you saying?" Bianca asked, but her voice suggested she was starting to understand perfectly that I'm saying that Maximilian let me believe for 3 years that my body was broken, that I was defective, that I was the reason we couldn't have children. He watched me inject myself with hormones, undergo painful procedures, and blame myself for our fertility problems while he knew the entire time that there was nothing wrong with me. Maximilian's mother looked at her son with horror. "Maximilian, is this true?" "It's not that simple," Maximilian said desperately. but his denial sounded hollow even to his own ears. The situation was that Maximilian didn't want to have children with me, I said calmly, adjusting Celeste on my hip. But instead of being honest about that, he sabotaged our attempts to conceive while making me believe I was the problem. That's not true. Maximilian exploded, but his outburst only made him look more guilty. Really? Then explain how I got pregnant with quadruplets 6 months after our divorce. Explain how a woman with unexplained infertility conceived 4 babies naturally with her new husband. The crowd was staring at Maximilian with growing understanding and disgust. His story had never made sense, but no one had questioned it because they'd trusted him. Now, faced with proof of his deception, people were seeing Maximilian for who he really was. That's when Gabriel chose to walk into the country club, having finished parking the car. He was tall, handsome, successful, and clearly adored me and our children. He kissed me gently and took Antoine from my arms with the natural ease of a devoted father. "Sorry I'm late, ma chérie," he said in his beautiful French accent. Traffic was terrible. He looked around the silent room and smiled politely. "I hope I didn't interrupt anything important, just introducing our children to some old friends," I said, smiling up at my husband with genuine love and happiness. The contrast was stark and impossible to ignore. Here was a man who clearly cherished his wife and children, who spoke to me with respect and affection, who radiated the kind of contentment that comes from a healthy, loving relationship. Maximilian stared at Gabriel, the successful, attractive, devoted husband who valued me in all the ways Maximilian never had. I could see the realization dawning in his eyes. He'd thrown away a woman who would have loved him forever, and for what? So he could feel superior to someone for a few years. "Maximilian," I said, looking at my ex-husband one final time. Thank you. Maximilian's voice was barely a whisper. "Thank you for showing me that I deserved better than settling for someone who saw me as broken. Thank you for forcing me to rebuild my life so I could discover how strong I really was. Thank you for leaving me so I could find someone who sees my worth." I looked around the room at all the people who believed Maximilian's lies about me. "And thank you for inviting me to your baby shower so I could show everyone who I really became after you threw me away." The room was completely silent except for the happy babbling of my children. Maximilian's reputation, his narrative, his entire identity as the reasonable man who'd escaped an unstable wife was lying in pieces around his feet. Bianca was staring at Maximilian with dawning horror, realizing she'd been manipulated just like I had been. The same man who'd convinced me I was broken was now her husband, and if he could lie so completely about something so fundamental, what else had he lied about? Mrs. Ashworth looked at her son with disgust and shame, understanding that she'd been complicit in his cruelty by believing his lies and making me feel unwelcome in their family. His friends and business associates were reassessing everything they thought they knew about Maximilian's character. The man they'd respected as a successful businessman was revealed to be someone capable of psychological abuse and systematic deception, but perhaps the most devastating reaction came from the children at the party. Bianca's kids from her previous marriage, who'd been playing nearby, had stopped their games to stare at my beautiful quadruplets. "Mommy," one of them said to Bianca, "why did Mr. Max say his first wife couldn't have babies when she has 4 babies, out of the mouths of babes?" Even the children could see through Maximilian's lies. As Gabriel and I loaded our children back into their car seats, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in years. Maximilian had spent so much energy trying to destroy me that he'd never realized he was actually freeing me to become someone extraordinary. "How do you feel?" Gabriel asked as we drove away from the country club. "I feel sorry for him," I said honestly, watching the country club disappear in our rearview mirror. Maximilian spent so much time focused on keeping me small that he never worked on becoming someone worth keeping. He threw away a woman who would have loved him forever. And for what? So he could feel superior to someone for a few years. "His loss," Gabriel said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. "Though I have to admit, I'm grateful he was too stupid to appreciate what he had. Otherwise, I never would have found you." I looked back at our 4 children sleeping peacefully in their car seats, then at my husband who'd seen my strength when Maximilian had only seen my desperation. "You know what the beautiful irony is?" I said to Gabriel as we drove through the French countryside toward our chateau. "Maximilian invited me to that baby shower to humiliate me, to show everyone how pathetic his ex-wife had become. But instead, he gave me the perfect stage to reveal his own lies, and the best part, Gabriel said with a smile, is that you didn't even have to try to destroy him. You just had to show up and be yourself. The truth did all the work that he was right. I hadn't gone to that baby shower seeking revenge. I'd gone as a successful, happy woman who wanted to close a chapter of her life. But sometimes the universe has a sense of humor, and sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your former abuser becomes irrelevant to your happiness. 3 months later, I received a call from Maximilian's divorce attorney. Apparently, Bianca had filed for divorce after discovering that Maximilian had been lying about other aspects of their relationship as well. The baby shower revelation had been the catalyst for her to investigate deeper, and she'd found a pattern of deception and manipulation that went far beyond our marriage. She's asking for full custody of her children and the baby, the lawyer explained. She's also requesting a significant settlement based on emotional distress and fraudulent misrepresentation. That I wasn't surprised. Once you see a narcissist's true nature, you can't unsee it. Bianca had realized that if Maximilian could lie so completely about something as fundamental as fertility, he could lie about anything, the lawyer continued. She's also mentioned that she might be willing to testify in any legal proceedings you might want to pursue regarding the fertility deception. That I appreciate the offer, I said, but I'm not interested in pursuing legal action. I have everything I want now. Maximilian can't hurt me anymore, and that was the truth. Maximilian had tried to write a story where I was the broken ex-wife who'd ruined a good marriage through my own inadequacies. But stories can be rewritten by people who refuse to accept someone else's narrative about their worth. 6 months after the baby shower, Gabriel and I received an invitation to a charity gala in New York. It was for the same literacy nonprofit where I'd worked when I first met Maximilian, and they wanted to honor me for the success of our luxury consultancy and our contributions to children's education. Should we go? Gabriel asked, reading the invitation. That I thought about it for a moment. New York held so many painful memories, but it also held the memory of the woman I'd been before Maximilian tried to break me. The woman who'd been passionate about helping children, who'd believed in the power of education to change lives. Yes, I said. I think we should go. The gala was held at the same hotel where Maximilian and I had attended countless social events during our marriage. But this time, I walked into that ballroom as the guest of honor, not as someone's accessory. Gabriel looked stunning in his tuxedo, and I wore a gown that had been featured in Vogue the month before. We were introduced as one of Europe's most successful entrepreneurial couples, and the applause was genuine and warm. During my acceptance speech, I talked about the importance of believing in children's potential, about how education could transform lives, about how everyone deserved to discover their own worth. But I also talked about resilience, about how sometimes the worst things that happen to us become the catalyst for discovering our true strength. There was a time in my life when someone convinced me I was broken, I said, looking out at the audience. When someone made me believe that my worth was tied to my ability to fulfill their expectations. But I learned that other people's opinions of us don't define our reality. We define our own reality. The applause was thunderous, and I could see people in the audience wiping away tears. After the ceremony, as Gabriel and I were leaving the hotel, I saw a familiar figure in the lobby. Maximilian was sitting alone at the bar, looking older and more defeated than I'd ever seen him. His hair was graying at the temples, his face was drawn, and he had the hollow look of a man who'd lost everything that mattered to him. For a moment, our eyes met across the lobby. I saw recognition flash in his gaze, followed by something that looked like regret. But I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no pain. Just a mild curiosity about the stranger he'd become. Gabriel noticed my pause and followed my gaze. Did I ask that him? He asked quietly. Yes, I said. That's Maximilian. Do you want to say something to him? I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. There's nothing left to say. He's not part of my story anymore. As we walked out of the hotel into the New York night, Gabriel took my hand. You know what I love most about you? He said. What's that? You could have let what he did to you make you bitter and angry. Instead, you used it to become more compassionate, more successful, more beautiful. You turned his cruelty into your strength. I squeezed his hand, thinking about the journey that had brought me to this moment. From the broken woman who believed she was worthless, to the successful entrepreneur and mother who discovered her own power, Maximilian had tried to destroy me, but he'd accidentally set me free. He tried to convince me I was broken, but he'd actually shown me how strong I was. He tried to write my story, but I'd taken back the pen and written my own ending, and what an ending it was. A successful business, a loving marriage, 4 beautiful children, and the knowledge that I was exactly who I was supposed to be. Sometimes the universe doesn't just give you justice. Sometimes it gives you poetry. And sometimes the best revenge is simply living so well that your former abuser becomes irrelevant to your happiness. As Gabriel and I flew back to France the next morning, I looked down at the city where my old life had ended and my new life had begun. Somewhere down there, Maximilian was probably still sitting at that bar, wondering how everything had gone so wrong, but I wasn't thinking about Maximilian anymore. I was thinking about our children waiting for us at home, about the vineyard that would be their inheritance, about the business Gabriel and I were building together, about all the beautiful tomorrow stretching out ahead of us. Maximilian had gotten exactly what he deserved. The consequences of his own cruelty. And I had gotten exactly what I'd always deserved. A love built on truth, respect, and genuine partnership. The plane lifted off into the morning sky, carrying me away from the past and toward a future that was entirely my own creation. Below us, New York grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared completely, taking with it the last remnants of the woman I used to be. In her place was Valentina Moreau. Mother, wife, entrepreneur, survivor. A woman who'd learned that sometimes when someone tries to break you, they accidentally teach you how unbreakable you really are, and that, I realized as we flew toward home, was the most beautiful revenge of all. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been told you weren't enough, if you've ever had to rebuild your life from nothing, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Because everyone deserves to know that their worth isn't determined by someone else's inability to see it. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most end up giving us the greatest gift of all. The gift of discovering who we really are when we stop believing their lies about who we're supposed to be. And sometimes, just sometimes, karma doesn't just knock on your door. Sometimes she arrives in a luxury vehicle with reinforcements, ready to show the world exactly who you've become when you refuse to stay broken.